there's so many more stories available for Christians to tell than what people are doing. But they got to be just brave to tell it. There also needs to be a platform that's brave enough to allow those stories to be told. That's what we say when we're raising up fearless filmmakers. That's really what our goal is.
Welcome to the Spencer Whiteout podcast. Rated R.
You had some criminal charges with you, bro. Guess like we're avoiding the shark. Call it leather fetish.
Yo, great turbo neck guy.
I'll give you a kiss. You give me your number.
That checked out a ton, dude. Tell me you felt it. We're Americans. We're the ones that are descendants from the 1776 musket-bearing motherfuckers.
Welcome to the Spencer Whiteout podcast, where we collect experiences as badges, memories as treasures, and stories as wealth. In this episode, I interview Lore co-founder Marcus Pittman. We talk all about film distribution, crowdfunding, controversial views, and retaking the culture for Christ. Let's dive in. So Lore is essentially a new breed of indie film funding and distribution. It's a clever combination of Netflix and Kickstarter as a new business model. So speaking from personal experience, my biggest struggle since completing my feature film Space Waves has been getting another feature film going. So for me, I love to see what you're doing with Lore, and it's empowering creators and skipping the gatekeepers. And in your own words, you've created a marketplace to connect rule-breaking filmmakers with consumers who want the rules broken. So it's a rad concept. It's growing quickly. I'm excited to hear more about it. But first things first, I want to ask you, Marcus, how you got into film.
Great question. So I was actually always into some sort of faith-based filmmaking or in the Christian evangelical space. My first video production job was when I was a summer counselor at Bible camp. The camp director asked if I knew how to work a camera and wanted to just film the kids instead of being a camp counselor. I was like, well, that sounds fun. I had no idea what I was doing, but it was enough to get me an internship at a local news station. And so that's sort of where I got started doing video production for real, and then got a bunch of ministry film jobs. And I've just always hated Christian movies as just how bad they were and wanted to figure out what could be done to sort of solve that problem. So I did that. I built a YouTube studio called Apologia Studios. It's over 500,000 YouTube subscribers now. And then I went and worked for an ad agency that did all the advertising for PureFlix movies. So just marketing to 65-year-old women, you know, making Lifetime rom-com faith-based stuff that nobody under 30 cares about. And just got kind of sick of it. Did a pro-life movie, a documentary, spent a year working on that. And then that got kicked off of Amazon, back when Amazon Prime was letting you upload whatever you wanted. And I was like, man, we got a real problem here. Like, there is a massive problem in the faith-based industry. More broadly, conservative film. Like, at the time, Hollywood was really starting to show their diversity casting and was doing all these things to sort of make movies worse.
Yeah.
And nobody was trying to figure out a solution, and nobody was looking to see where it could go or what would happen. And so we just decided that the easiest solution is just to get rid of the executives in Hollywood and allow the consumers to fund movies with their monthly subscription. And that's what we did. That's how we built Lore. Yeah. We call it Netflix and Kickstarter's non-woke baby. But really, the basic idea is just you're actually spending your monthly subscription every week funding movies and TV shows. Right now, all the funding of films, as you know, is determined by the distribution companies, the studios, or, you know, the older film investor who will invest in your movie as long as his granddaughter can act in it, right? Like, that's like, that's the world of film fundraising. That's how you get money for your movies. And it's very, very gate-kept. It's very, very hard to get seen, especially in the conservative and faith-based spaces, because there's not an underground punk rock art culture where you can make a name for yourself. We don't have an MTV. We don't have an Adult Swim. We don't have a Trauma Films. You know, we don't have companies making B movies to get people seen and whatnot. And so we just sort of were lacking this underground culture, and that's why we built Lore. was really just to create that punk rock art house.
Yeah, so good. And we're definitely going to get into that more.
I just want to be clear. I think a lot of the faith-based filmmakers are insanely talented. A lot of them rival what's in Hollywood. The reason faith-based movies are bad or cheesy, as you say, is because they're required to be that way. They're instructed to be that way, and the red pen goes through the scripts and makes sure that they're that way. So everything that people hate about Christian films is not because of the filmmakers or the lack of talent or even the lack of money available in the industry. It's because that is the genre that they've created. It's like saying, hey, I'm going to go make this really masculine film for Lifetime. And it's like, well, you're not. Because Lifetime, they don't want masculine content. They have a market that's for women. Say, hey, we're going to make actually authentic Christian films and stories that people actually care about. And then the response is, no, you're not. You're going to make this horse and puppy movie. It is by decree. And it is not by the choice of the filmmakers and stuff like that. You know, when we say Christian movies shouldn't suck, but it's okay that they do. It's okay for Christian films to suck. That's how you get better as an artist. You know, it's like the comedy clubs, right? You go in there and you bomb in front of everybody over and over and over again until you get your set right. It's totally okay for Christian filmmakers to make bad movies. The difference is they shouldn't suck on purpose. That is the distinction, I think. And that's what happens when you don't have a real underground film culture.
Yeah. So speaking of that underground film culture, this also reminds me of the underground music culture when I was growing up. That was really influential to me because Air One was always branded as the positive alternative, and they would be playing Christian rock and hip hop and a lot of awesome music that I really, really loved. And there was a whole culture there that was supported by the radio stations. Tooth and Nail was the record label, Solid State, Beck Recordings, a bunch of
Tooth
different...
and Nail's amazing. Like, I've said to people, like, when they're like, well, what do you mean, like, you're doing faith-based content or conservative content, but you're not K-Love? And I was like, well, because we're Tooth and Nail.
Exactly.
I think the podcast is called Unlabeled.
Yeah.
It's an amazing podcast, and Tooth and Nail is amazing. I would say for sure some of the inspiration of what we want to do. So we've had it. We have moments. We have times like that where we sort of have these moments, especially in Christian history. You know, I would say early VeggieTales was that, right? Like, it was just super low budget, just doing what you can with what you have. That's gone away. You know, Phil Vischer's gone into wokeism and all that sort of stuff. But the point is, all major mainstream entertainment movements, whether it's music or movies or television or cartoons or comedy, they all start in these underground scenes. And it's from that underground that you build a national culture. And we don't have that. There's no desire to build that because it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time and effort. And there's probably not going to be a quick return on investment in the next 5 years. It's a more 20 to 30 year play. But I think the time's right. I think people are ready for that again. And I think now, especially, I mean, we're doing this post-attempted Trump assassination. I've said, you know, nobody cares about horse and puppy movies anymore. Like, those aren't the stories they want to be told. They want stories of, you know...
Raw and real.
I mean, my goodness, they witnessed a bullet just whizzing by his head and miraculously missing. No faith-based writer could write that story. No Hollywood writer could write that story. Just tremendous, and we all saw it. And now there's a hunger, and people feel like we're in war. To some degree, we're in a Cold War, Cold Civil War, whatever. But people just want stories of heroes and risking your life. And, you know, people resonate with stories. That's why that image of Trump is so crazy. Like, that's what people remember, the images.
Yeah, it's such an epic picture. The raised fist, the bloody ear, and the flag in the background.
Unbelievable.
It's so epic.
I've heard, like, so many crazy breakdowns of, like, the art of that photo. You know, there's red, white, and blue. He's dressed in a blue and white suit, and there's red on his face, and the flag is behind him. There's just so many crazy stuff. And he's just like, man, like, that was a miraculous event that just happened. It was tremendous. It was like a moon landing photo.
Yeah, I agree. I'm still shaken by it. It's still on the front of my mind. It's pretty incredible. Just the miraculous turning of the head and then his response to it all. Like the whole thing is stranger than fiction. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So you don't mind stirring the pot. You like to post things political. You like to get in the thick of it, huh?
Yeah, because I think like when were artists ever afraid of stirring the pot, right? Like the whole punk rock, Down with the Man, Woodstock, right? Like all that sort of stuff. I mean, first off, it was all very political. So I don't think there's such thing as really this like politically neutral art form. There's no neutrality. Every artist has a story that the artist is trying to tell. There's no neutrality in that story. And sometimes you can do it really well. Make a film like Signs, for example, what Mel Gibson did, which is a faith-based film, but you wouldn't know it. Same is true with, what's that Denzel movie with the Bible?
Yeah, Book of Eli.
Yeah, Book of Eli.
Yeah, yes. That's such a good film.
There's so many movies like that. The Patriot.
Yes, another one of my favorites.
They all have some sort of worldview or agenda that they're trying to get to, but they do it so well. Every film is propaganda for something. It's just that some is better propaganda than others. So what we've been missing is the fact that the whole world of storytelling is open to us, and we don't have to have this sort of forceful, fake, and neutered version of faith-based films. It doesn't make sense. The Bible's full of circumcision and violence and beheadings and limbs coming off. And one of our shows that's really popular right now is called Barely Biblical, and it's animated teddy bears reenacting the most violent Old Testament Bible stories. You just think of it as like Veggie Tales, but like only the violent stories. And circumcision is whether the teddy bears have a nip in their tag, and all the beheadings are like stuffing and replacing blood and guts. Just phenomenal, hilarious animated cartoon. And it's also probably more faithful to scripture than a lot of VeggieTales stuff was, because it has to be, right? Like, I mean, you're telling these very, very complex stories, but you're doing it in a humorous way. So I'm a big fan of that. Comedy is a really powerful way to tell truth. So that story's good. But yeah, so it's just like there's so many more stories available for Christians to tell than what people are doing. But they got to be just brave, and they got to be brave to tell it. There also needs to be a platform that's brave enough to allow those stories to be told.
Yes, exactly. I've definitely felt that void and missing the Christian art that I want to connect with, because like I was saying about the music, I really was connected to all this Christian music in my upbringing and growing up. And then past 2010, that whole industry of Tooth and Nail and Erewhon being the positive alternative, all those things kind of started going away, and there wasn't really as much content for youth and adolescents as there used to be. And so then I'm like, okay, well now I'm going to start gravitating more into like the secular space and like these non-Christian metalcore bands, because they're making the best music right now, and that's the music I like, and there isn't Christians making art that I connect with. And same thing with movies. It's like I would be so stoked to watch mostly Christian movies if they were good, but simply they're not. There's just not a whole lot of stuff that I personally connect with. And so it's like I really feel that void, and that's part of my calling as well as a Christian and a filmmaker. Is like I want to make films for the Christians out there like me, that want to see raw, real stories that are still fun and funny, but they can be serious, and they're going to have God's truth interwoven into them, but it's never at the expense of the art.
I completely agree. It's just we had like a really strong Christian subculture.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was cheesy. Like, we can look back at like Salty the Bible, even VeggieTales, and go, oh yeah, it was cheesy. But it was ours. Like, it was our culture. So it didn't even really matter that it was cheesy.
And a lot of it was cool, like Family Force 5, my favorite band of all time.
Right,
those guys were bold and wild and crazy, and they were just awesome.
Yeah, or like I think I felt like we invented a whole genre of ska music. Right? Like nobody else was doing that except for Christians. Like, they were the biggest names in that thing. And, that was such a great genre. So we, like I said, we had things. We had culture. We had even WWJD bracelets, right? Like, there was Christian bookstores all around. And I think a lot of the problem was just as that business became bigger and bigger, there was less risk available for people to invest in like lower budget stuff. And then you started to have to cater to your major markets, which was, Lifeway Christian bookstores targeted 35-year-old soccer moms. And so all media became for 35-year-old soccer moms. And that's where you get, modern K-Love, modern Christian television, modern Christian radio. It's all towards that audience.
And it drives the men away. It makes men not want to go to church and not want to be involved because it's just not for them.
Right. When all your mainstream Christian culture is feminized, then it pushes the men out. That's why we made a pretty conscious decision when we started Lore, is like, we're going to be focused on making masculine entertainment, and being consistent with that. We look at like Daily Wire when they launched. Their first 4 films had like female hero action leads. It's like, what's going on? You guys are making the same mistake the video game industry is doing right now. And they hate it. They hate that feminizing of action heroes in their video games. And Daily Wire did it. And it's even weirder for Daily Wire to do it, because Daily Wire would say, well, women shouldn't be in the draft. But like all their, lead women in their movies would kick butt in the draft if they're in the military. So it's just
it's a little inconsistency there.
Super inconsistent, super disconnected. And there's just not a lot of thought in that sort of stuff. And, that's why I think like we have to take the power of creating the content outside of just a select few and just open it back up to the general public to be able to decide what movies they wanted to see and pay for, much like you could, at the movie theater. If you bought a ticket for a movie, that was the movie you wanted to see. And ever since we went to streaming, there was no financial power in the individual consumer anymore, because they just pulled that money together and made whatever they wanted.
Yeah. And so why do you think that is, with, like you said, Lifeway and just the Christian market in general being so feminized and catering to older generations and those kinds of things?
I think it was done because it made sense. The main person who shopped at Lifeway Christian Bookstore was a 35-year-old soccer mom. So basically, if you look at it, and you're creating a business plan, whether it's a movie or a music or whatever you're trying to sell, or a book, you go, well, I need to get my product on the shelves of Lifeway Christian bookstores. And so automatically that defines who you're making content for. So then what's happened is now Lifeway Christian bookstores, they've gone bankrupt. They're out of business. They don't exist anymore, as well as family Christian bookstores, and pretty much all the major Christian bookstores are gone. Those things disappeared before there could be alternative distribution means. So it wasn't like there were major online Christian bookstores that were taking money away from Lifeway. It was really just Amazon that did it. So there wasn't like a niche way to distribute content to specific audiences anymore. And then they just closed the stores down. And everyone's kind of wondering, like, wait a minute, how do I make a movie or TV show now? If Lifeway's not going to sell it, what do I do?
Yeah.
And so that was a real problem. But I would say that men are the majority consumers of streaming platforms. I think enough data shows that. I think that's where the future is how can we get all the guys that listen to Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate, to get them not just listening to talk radio, but actually giving them stories and narratives again.
Yeah, for sure. And so what would you say your worldview is with infiltrating culture with Christian art? How do you see those merging? How do you do it well?
I think you just be honest. I can tell you how the secular world does it poorly. They substitute the Little Mermaid, make the Little Mermaid black, empowerment and all this other sort of stuff. They completely don't even care about the story or the movie or the quality of it. Just kind of push those sort of agendas in. Look at a show like New Amsterdam, which started out really great as this sort of like way, like, how do we provide patients with free healthcare and still function as a private business, as a private hospital. That was really great for like the first season. And then it just went crazy after COVID. Black Lives Matter episodes, transgender rights episodes. There was an episode where somebody had like a brain tumor because of stress from racism or something like it was just like all this weird stuff.
That
like,
just
what is
sounds
going
like
on?
a joke.
Yeah, right. And so it became really just like the pure flicks of secular media, where they're just like preaching all this sort of stuff. And so that's how they do it poorly. So to figure out like how Christians can do it well, I think one is we just tell good stories that are true to the world. So we make our men men and our women women, and we expose the weaknesses in males and females, but also their strengths, I think, is really important. I don't think we need to be afraid of making content that offends the government. I want to see stories and movies that show the FBI in a bad light or the CIA in a bad light. CBS has 3 FBI shows now that are all favorable to the FBI, and they all come on the same night, and nobody is asking, why do we need 3 positive shows about the FBI when nobody trusts the FBI as it is, right? So that sort of bravery and really getting the government out of the storytelling aspects of our culture is really important. And I mean, you could see, after the Biden election, the entire media just immediately changed its narrative towards Biden in an instant. They all got the memo, and just suddenly Biden was a disabled old man.
After the Biden debate, you mean?
Yeah, after the Biden debate. And it's just like, well, where have y'all been for 4 years? You've been calling us conspiracy theorists and all this sort of stuff. And during that time, like, we never really created any like stories and movies that really like countered that narrative. And if the government is using news media for propaganda, they're most certainly using Hollywood media for propaganda as well. And I think we've seen that. And so we have to be as cunning as they are and fearless as they are.
More so, even.
Yeah, even more so. Yeah, for sure.
What's that verse about Jesus saying, wise as serpents, innocent as doves?
Yeah, that too. Also, I point in Revelation where it says cowards go to hell. That's a good one. If you look around, you can just see how cowardice has just destroyed everything. Like, the reason why there's no whistleblowers explaining what's happening in the government, it's all cowardice. The reason why our stories are so impotent and meaningless, it's all cowardice. And so that's what we say when we're raising up fearless filmmakers. That's really what our goal is.
Right. And a lot of the problem, too, is that because Christians believe, Earth is not our final destination, this isn't our home, therefore we're just going to look forward to heaven, and we're going to kind of just ignore everything that's happening now and pray that Jesus comes back very soon and try to get out of Earth as fast as possible, And with that kind of mindset, right, it relinquishes our responsibility to subdue the earth, to glorify God with our creations, and to fight back against this culture that's made it, a trash world, an inversion of what God created it to be. So really, it's just a lot of sinful people being cowards, not doing their job, and we need to act in boldness, like you said.
It creates a Gnostic attitude towards your films too, right? So like if you don't use a Christian actor, it's not a Christian movie, right? Like that, all that sort of stuff. Or if there's something in the movie that I disagree with.
If there's a swear word, it's
swear
no longer
word,
Christian.
Or there's too much violence, or, I always say, like, I want to see Christian movies where the gay guy is the bad guy. Like let's do that. Like, let's at least do that. But the problem is, like, everybody's been trained that if there's any mention of homosexuality in a Christian movie at all, then it's an automatic endorsement. And it's like, it's not true. Like, you can have evil in a movie.
Nobody's got the guts to make a homosexual a bad guy in a Christian movie.
Oh, we do.
Really?
well, it's not really a bad guy, but our chief content officer has finished a script for a satirical rom-com called The Lesbian and the Lumberjack. And it's about a lesbian who gets a flat tire in rural Oregon, and a lumberjack comes to rescue her. And she realizes she's not gay. She just never met a real man before. But like in the script, all of her gay friends from Portland try to come and rescue her from the bigots in rural Oregon. And you realize that they're the actual bigots. And so yeah, there's a lot of homosexuality in that movie. Probably the gayest movie we ever made. Gay! Present it in the proper light. So I'm really excited about that.
Good. There's a book I've been reading called The Boniface Option. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah. Who's
it's
the author
incredible.
of that again?
Andrew Isker.
Andrew Isker. Yeah.
Yeah, and the subtitle is A Christian Counter-Offensive Strategy in a Post-Christian World. And I highly recommend it. It's my favorite book of the year, and it really goes into everything we're talking about with retaking culture for Christ and being bold with our storytelling and with just the way we live our lives.
Yeah, we forget, especially in the Christian film industry, we forget that men are created to fight wars, whether that's on a local level or a national level or even a global level. We're created to fight. That God gave us the strength and the ability to think that way and to do those things. And, you know, when all of our movies, when all the men are soft,
getting their butts kicked by girls,
or just emotionally weak as they are in rom-com movies or something like that, it's very, very hard for men to respect that kind of thing. They might not realize that's why they don't respect it, but I think ultimately they do. But I think like you see the difference when you see like a movie like Top Gun, or you see a movie like, you know, the original Jurassic Park, where this guy is he doesn't want kids, and then the whole movie he has to rescue these kids and look after these kids. You know, tremendous fatherhood story there. But those are the movies that do well. Those are the ones that are really successful. You know, look at the difference between The Acolyte and The Mandalorian, right? Like, massive difference. And that's because The Mandalorian is a masculine story. At least it was.
Yeah, until season 3.
Yeah, until season 3. But the first 2 seasons are just adoption and covenant themes and protecting your child. Like, amazing, which is exactly what the first Star Wars was, which was father-son story too. So that's how you build those big franchises.
Yeah, it's about good and evil as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know, same thing with Batman, right? Like Batman's father died and he's seeking vengeance for killing his father and having to grow up without parents and all those themes that really resonate. I think it's pretty demonstrable that like the best films and the ones that transcend the most are the ones with genuine masculine themes at the core.
Yeah, and speaking of superheroes, the original Spider-Man 1 and 2 with Tobey Maguire, those movies are so powerful because it's all about taking on responsibility and really those themes of sacrifice.
Growing up, right? Like growing up, maturing, manning up. I mean, just compare any of those character stories and their motivations with, was it Captain Marvel? You know, where she's like, oh, I was rejected from flying in this airplane, so now I'm just going to be this superhero. That's the worst motivation of any, because the man got the job. Now I'm going to be the most powerful superhero the Marvel universe has. It's ridiculous. It's just nonsense. And nobody buys it. Like, you don't know why you don't buy it, but it's because you, as an image bearer who's creating the image of God, you see that story and it's just not honest with the way God made the world.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about lore. How did you come up with the idea and how do you plan to move forward, you know, canceling Hollywood and decentralizing the film industry? I like that you said it's a long-term play, what you're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal is to be a global brand, you know, to be a global tech media brand. But you don't build those overnight and those don't just come out of nowhere. And so you have to kind of start in the niches, as they say. And so the real goal really is just, you know, you start out by creating an underground environment. We call it basically an incubator where artists can come. They're responsible for funding their content and getting it made and producing it and putting it out there before everybody. And then if the audience likes it, they can fund a second episode. And if they don't like it, they don't have to. First stage is really just creating that incubation chamber for artists to really test themselves, to grow an audience and to build a name. That's the first step. And then when I say it's like a long-term play, it is a long-term play because you're going to get the artists that, you know, start on lore, but then they get hired to go work on bigger budget projects later on. But ultimately, at the core, we're the place all the artists build a name for themselves.
Right, because there's so much opportunity and it's kind of low risk, taking chances on younger people that are up and coming and trying to prove themselves. So I want to get your take on Blumhouse and A24 because those seem like the movie studios that are you know, I mean, they're still in Hollywood, whatever, but like they're doing their own thing. And clearly what they're doing is working. Blumhouse being the horror house, which is doing a bunch of low budget movies. And then one of them will be successful and they'll make enough money to pay for all the others. A24 being very artistically bold and giving their directors full creative freedom. And they just seem to be making hit after hit. So what do you think about those studios? And is there any other ones that stand out?
Yeah. Oh, Blumhouse and A24 is amazing because they're both low budget, or at least initially they started that way. And then they've built tons of artists and stuff that have come out of that. That we talk about building a culture, that's what you need, is you need those systems that can test artists at low budgets and then move them on to bigger budgets and bigger cultural transformation and stuff like that. It's not the look and the aesthetic that makes something A24. It's the freedom and the restraints at the same time. It's like, look, you're not going to get a lot of money, but you're going to get complete freedom. And that creates amazing content. What I don't think people understand is, like, when you create content with lower budgets, you actually have more freedom. Because once you start getting into like $100 million, $200 million budgets, you have so many people that are putting their thumbprint on everything and their approval and their notes.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Way too many cooks in the kitchen. Way too many people who don't really care about the film's final result as a story, but are only mainly interested in the return. And so as your budgets grow, so does the risk that comes with it. And with the risk, your freedom is eliminated. And so that's sort of our real main focus at Lore is we tell every artist, you have complete creative freedom on whatever you want to do. The only thing we ask is that you don't encourage blasphemy. You can't encourage that Christianity is false or anything like that. And we have no nudity clause. Those are the only two rules that are hard nosed, but you can do whatever else you want. And that's way more freedom than anybody in Hollywood has.
Yeah. So you guys aren't actually creating content yet. Is that something that's on the table later, or is it just we don't want to create anything, we just want all the creators to come to us?
Lore does not create any content. So we foundationally see ourselves as a technology company. So we focus on the development. The site does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's a really nice piece of technology. And the undercarriage of that, the behind the scenes of that is very complex and in depth. You know, we have, viewer watch time, stats, analytics data, but also we have funding data and stuff like that that's valuable to streamers as a whole, you know? So for example, the fact that we can look and see, wow, our most watched show is this preschool show called 2x2, but it's also the least funded show on our platform. That's a completely different data point than someone like, let's say, Daily Wire, who looks around and says, man, Netflix and Disney, all their watch time is based on children's programming. So we got to, build this thing called BentKey that's all children programming. But what they're not seeing is what we see is that, well, parents don't really spend money on that stuff. They're just kind of happy it's there and keep it on as background noise. So we get to see that. We see us as data focused and technology driven. That really is at the core of what we're doing.
Yeah. So tell me about your biblical view of investment, bearing each other's burdens and risk.
Oh, man, it's controversial. And, the Bible says in the parable of the talents, Jesus gives 3 guys money. Some of them go off and invest it and they make a return. And then one guy just buries it in the ground, right? And then Jesus comes back and he rebukes him, basically casting him off to hell for doing that. And the other guys made a return. Jesus' response was, well, you could have made more money in the bank than by burying it in the sand. And I think Christians have gone, hey, I could make more money in the bank. And that's how they see their investments. Like by just doing
the bare minimum
IRAs and 401ks and, basic real estate. B2B SaaS is huge in the faith-based investing world. You can't convince people to not invest in a B2B SaaS in the faith-based investing world. So just like all that sort of stuff, it's totally okay and acceptable to invest in real estate and B2B SaaS and make safe returns. But if you don't take those returns and those profits and invest in risky things, there's no point in investing in the B2B SaaS and the real estate place. It's okay to use one to get to another place. But that's not what we're seeing, especially from boomer investors right now, who I've had so many investors tell me they're in their 70s and they're not doing any more investments anymore because they probably won't live long enough to see the return. And it's like, yeah, but what about your grandkids? You're just going to cash out of all your investments that you've made over the course of your years. And then when you die, you're just going to write a check to your kids and they're just going to spend it on what? I would much rather my parents leave me a successful, functioning, culturally influential business than I would a check.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bible talks about, the glory that it is to leave an inheritance to your children. And we just think of cash in the bank, but it's way more meaningful than that. It's way more important than that. And
yeah, it's powerful stuff. And that's the way we need to be thinking, building kingdoms, and inheritance for our kids and not just thinking about ourselves. Wrapping up here, for those that are interested in partnering with Lore and becoming a creator and wanting to put their content on your platform, how does that work? What can they expect? And what does that process look like?
Yeah, so if you want to be a creator, it's pretty simple. One is have an amazing idea and then get it to us and then determine what your budget's going to be and how much you want to raise. And then go out there and get the people to join and subscribe to Lore and raise money for your project once it's up. It's a pretty simple process. I will say right now, we're doing really well at funding sub $5,000 pieces of content, which isn't a lot, but think of it more in terms of like early Adult Swim, or like we like to say, like we're one step above production of YouTube. Like what's that in between of like Hollywood and YouTube? Like that's kind of where we are. So you can go there. And if you already have a project that's done and it's just kind of sitting around, get in touch with Jason Farley. I did send him your project, Spencer. So hopefully he's been really busy right now, but hopefully he'll be able to get with you soon on that. But yeah, just like pitch the craziest ideas. People say, yeah, but like, what are you looking for? And our answer is usually the same. It's whatever PureFlix said no to. Like that's what we want. Like whatever they would say no to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, just in terms of the way the fundraising works, you pick the price of your production. We'll tell you if we think that you're going to be able to do what you want to do with that price or not, or whether you'll even be able to get that much money on our platform. So we'll have those conversations with you, but for the most part, you determine what the price is. And then whatever your asking price is, you get 100% of that. So our cut comes from the monthly subscriber beforehand, before it goes to you. And then the subscriber then can fund with their weekly allotment of what we call loot. So you can use that loot every week to determine which projects you want to fund. And that comes out to about 60% of your monthly subscription money, I would say. And then if you want to fund a show that you're really passionate about, you can buy gold loot. And then from that gold loot, we've had people spend upwards of $1,000 just funding content on their end that they want to see on the platform. There's that. And then I would also say we just implemented a new thing called Blitz Mode. The way that works is if you run a business. So basically it'll be a $10,000 match and it'll be on a project that you as the sponsor want, or you can fund the first amount of funds site-wide on every piece of content. So you can blitz the entire website. And basically it just allows subscribers to double or triple their contributions towards a project, but your company gets to be seen at the forefront of that. And then you get a 5-second pre-roll in the beginning of all content that gets funded that says Blitz by your company name. So a very simple process. It allows for the artists to be funded by corporate advertising without the advertising determining what's in the artist's movie or TV show because it's not made yet. And then it allows for the artist to get a lot more money for pre-production than they could with like a Tubi advertising thing. Right, because your project has to be completed before it goes to Tubi or any of these AVOD platforms. So there's no way to really get money from corporate sponsors in pre-production.
Yeah, right on. And so what's next?
We're going to launch a documentary soon that I actually had a part in producing. I was hired to do it, called Pro-Life Spider-Man. And it's about Mason Deschamps. He climbs up skyscrapers and puts a pro-life banner on the skyscrapers. And that'll be coming out probably in August. We just launched Breaking Laws, the first episode of that. You can go and watch that live now. It's a travel show. he travels the country and he breaks the stupidest laws in certain cities. So the first episode is about Colorado. It's illegal to loan your vacuum to your neighbor. So he goes and does that and talks about, why these stupid laws exist in this city and why nobody has struck a law from the books, but they're always putting more laws on the books. Really great show. And so that pilot episode's up. It's getting good reviews already. And we just hired a CMO named Kevin Swan. We announced that today. And he's going to help us in scaling our subscriber growth and really honing in on our brand messaging and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about that. Really great guy. And hopefully we'll be scaling pretty quickly now that we got him.
Right on, man. Well, that's all the questions I had for you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it's been really cool to peel back the layers and learn more about what you're doing.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, leave a rating/review. 5 stars is a power play. Be sure to follow the show and connect with me on social medias at Spencer Whiteout to stay up to date. Also, if you're curious about my feature film Space Waves, you can find it on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, and YouTube. As always, stay tuned, stay hyped. That's a wrap.
And that's it.